In 701 BC, the Levant was suffocating under the weight of the Assyrian war machine. This was an empire that dismantled its enemies, sweeping across the region with vast, highly organized siege operations that left nothing but scorched earth in their wake. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 8, captures a sudden shift in this campaign. It states that an Assyrian commander, Rabshakeh, returned and found his king warring against Libnah, having heard that he had departed from Lachish. Rabshakeh is moving away from the front lines of Jerusalem to reorganize with the main force. This maneuver suggests a moment of strategic consolidation, pulling high-ranking leadership back toward the king as the campaign's focus shifts. This geographic shift from Lachish to Libnah is a tactical repositioning along the Judean foothills. We are looking at a disciplined, heavily armed military structure that suddenly finds itself needing to consolidate its front line. This withdrawal marks the first fracture in an unchecked imperial advance. To understand how the greatest military power of the ancient Near East failed, we have to look at the exact mechanics of their collapse. Miles away from those sprawling encampments sits Jerusalem, heavily fortified on its hill and entirely separated from the surrounding devastation. The text directly addresses this contrast. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 22 states, "The virgin, the daughter of Zion, has despised you and laughed you to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head at you." The term daughter operates here as an abstract personification. It represents the collective population of the city responding as a single, unified entity. Calling the city a virgin carries precise military meaning. Despite the ruin of the surrounding Judean countryside, Jerusalem's unbroken stone defenses prove it has never been breached or ravished by invaders. The city's intact physical state breaks the psychological momentum of the siege. By simply existing unviolated, Jerusalem becomes a living mockery of Sennacherib's perceived power. We must analyze this conflict as a clash of sovereignties, a collision between a terrestrial empire and divine authority. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 23 lays out the stakes. "Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed, and against whom hast thou exalted thy voice, even against the Holy One of Israel?" This reframes the entire siege. Sennacherib's aggression is identified as an explicit theological challenge, positioning himself as a direct rival to Israel's God. We see this arrogance in verse 24, where Sennacherib boasts of crossing mountains with his chariots and cutting down the tall cedars and choice fir trees of Lebanon and Carmel. He continues in verse 25, claiming to have dug wells, drunk water, and with the soles of his feet dried up all the rivers of the besieged places. These declarations are textbook imperial propaganda. The emperor is asserting absolute mastery over geography itself, claiming the power to level ancient forests and command the flow of water sources. Sennacherib is attempting to elevate his military logistics to the level of divine omnipotence. By framing his campaign as an act of natural mastery, he sets the exact terms for his own ideological downfall.
The narrative then pivots to the divine response, dismantling the emperor's self-deification. In verse 26, God directly challenges him, asking, "Hast thou not heard long ago how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it?" Here is the theological counterargument. God asserts that Assyria was merely permitted to bring to pass the laying waste of defended cities into ruinous heaps. The decree places the superpower of the ancient Near East into a subordinate position, suggesting that its geopolitical movements were orchestrated long before the current campaign. The prophetic text characterizes the Assyrian Empire as an instrument of divine intent, following a plan that precedes the empire's own rise to power. Because of this hubris, the text declares a specific, visceral consequence against the Assyrian emperor. Verse 29 states that because of his rage and tumult, God will put a hook in his nose and a bridle in his lips and turn him back the way he came. The Assyrians were known for utilizing literal hooks pierced through the noses or lips of conquered kings to drag them into captivity. This decree applies that exact practice to the emperor himself. The language reduces Sennacherib to a beast of burden, forced to endure the same humiliation he inflicted on his own captives.
The text weaponizes Assyria's own methods of psychological terror, describing a retreat that is both humiliating and involuntary. The text then moves from poetic judgment to the tangible proof of Judah's liberation. Verse 30 provides a sign to the survivors. They are to eat what grows of itself for 2 years, and then in the 3rd year, sow, reap, and plant vineyards. This diagram maps the recovery. In 701 BC, year 1, the siege leaves 0 cultivated output. In 700 BC, active planting remains suspended. By 699 BC, the population fully resumes organized planting of crops and vineyards. To execute an agrarian operation of this scale, planting organized rows of vineyards across the Judean hills requires absolute security and undisturbed access. This agricultural timeline provides chronological markers that Assyria has vacated Judah. We can trace the final geographic withdrawal of the Assyrian forces directly from this failure. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 34 confirms this route, stating, "By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city." Driven by the reality of 185,000 dead soldiers, Sennacherib's forces collapse and retreat before ever reaching the gates of Jerusalem. The text then provides the underlying justification for why Jerusalem was spared this destruction. Verse 35 gives a dual motivation, stating that God will defend this city to save it for his own sake and for his servant David's sake. Acting for the Lord's sake demonstrates to the watching world that Yahweh is the exclusive God, positioning the idols of foreign nations as worthless. Acting for David's sake ensures the physical preservation of the royal seed. This fulfills the dynastic promise established in 1 Kings chapter 9, maintaining the unbroken line to the throne. This concludes our overview. The events of 701 BC illustrate that history is governed by divine decree rather than military machines.